While you're making your way back to your seat, I'll just remind you, some of you, especially if you're a guest with us today, it'll be helpful to know that we've been in a summer series about art and spirituality. How do the arts nurture our spirituality? So how do the arts nurture spirituality? And I think it's been a really good series. The feedback from all of you has been positive all along the way. I think we're sort of sending each other out into the world to sort of notice and see new things. One of the things you should know is that Alex Treaster, our Director of Communications and Community Outreach, has had a huge role in the whole design and shape of this summer. Those of you who've been around a long time probably already assumed that, but he has. And from the very get-go, Alex and I and staff were talking together about how the summer was going to shape up. And this idea came from Alex about talking about the church as patron of the arts. Has been there and part of the conversation from the beginning. We knew it was going to land sometime. We have Alex with us on staff until next week, so we knew it had to land before then. So this is the Sunday it worked out. I'm delighted we can do this, be in conversation with Alex. We're going to do this in two chunks, so one little chunk now, and then we'll do some other parts of the service, and Alex and I will come back and do a second chunk here in a little bit. We want to start out talking a little bit more historically about some of these images you see here. And Alex, I think we're going to start over here in the Catacombs. Yes. Talk about the Catacombs, Rome, and why this image is interesting to you.
Yes, well, yeah, thanks, Jared, for hosting this conversation today. And as many of you know, my next chapter is going to be being a professor at KU. And the best professors that I always had lots and lots of material and always had ideas to throw at you. So when we were in preparation for the sermon, Jared was very good about focusing things in because I had so much material and so many things I wanted to share with you all.
Way too much material.
Yes, and he said, pick 3 things, which was great advice. So that way we're not all here till 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock today. So, but this first section is really going to be 3 different case studies looking at this relationship that has been very long-standing, thousands and thousands of years between spirituality, religion, and art. And so we're going to see just 3 examples of how that relationship has been embodied over time. And so the first piece that we're going to start with, as Jared mentioned, is over there in the transept. And this is a really amazing piece. This is from Rome. So this first piece we're going to look at, just to give you a sense of where this was discovered. If you've ever been to Rome, this was found in the Catacomb of Priscilla. And so here's the Vatican right here, and then the catacomb where this was discovered in the 1890s is located here. And this piece of artwork actually dates from the early 200s. It's one of the earliest pieces of Christian art that we know of. And the catacombs would have been a sacred place for early Christians. It would have been a place where, of course, they buried early Christians, but also a place where the early church would have come together and shared meals and also had a time to come together, because at that time it was actually a dangerous thing to identify as a Christian until Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. It was actually a subversive kind of thing to be a Christian, and especially to be a Christian artist. So that's the really interesting thing about this, is that the catacombs became a place where Christians could practice their beliefs and Christian artists could start to tell the stories of our faith. So when you were up and looking at these pieces of art during the greeting time, I'm just curious if there are any things that you all noticed, maybe 1 or 2 things when you were looking at this piece of art.
This one over here especially, from the Catacombs.
Yep.
Say it again.
Women. Yes, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That is a fascinating thing. So that is one of the things that was very evident when this was first discovered. And just to give you a sense of where you would find this. So the catacombs are this immense maze of different hallways and kind of cavernous passages. And you can actually go online now, and Google Maps has done a 360 tour. So you can actually tour the catacombs virtually now, which is kind of amazing. But this piece here would be, you would walk into this catacomb, and this is known as the Greek chapel. They found a lot of interesting pieces here, but there are some symbols here and some icons that would have been among the first places that language of Christianity and iconography was appearing. So when you walk in here, you can see this is actually the three magi that are depicted here above the archway, and the piece we're looking at is right here. And so as you zoom in, let's see, wrong way. There we go. So yeah, as we zoom in, we can see that there is a scene here of people sharing a meal. And yes, it is widely recognized that there is at least one woman depicted here. So that's fascinating that in the early church, you have at least one woman who is presiding over the shared meal and communion. You have symbols that are evident here. The baskets on the side are baskets of bread. The plates in front of them on the table are the fish. And so that is a reference both to the Eucharist, but also to the feeding of the 5,000. So there's multiple references there. And this language, these symbols, would have been a way for Christians to tell these stories and communicate when literacy was just not widely recognized at all. It's a very small part of the population that could actually read and write and therefore have access to these stories.
Yeah. So sorry to say you women would be eventually erased from these scenes of meal scenes important to Christians later on. But here, early in the 2nd century, things are good. Okay, anything else you want to mention about that, or do you want to move on, jump to the 16th, 17th centuries?
Yeah, just one more thing of note with this is the iconography that we see here. Some of these symbols have continued up until present day. And so, let's see, let's go forward. There's another close-up shot where you can see, so just to point out, the figure that's right here is the female figure, but there are some scholars who have argued that it may be all women around this table, and part of the evidence for that is what they're wearing, which would be, at the time, it was considered more for women as far as their clothing. But to go forward, so these are symbols that we can see. These are taken the wood carvings from our own pulpit right here, but these were the symbols representing the 4 Gospels. And so each Gospel is represented by a different symbol. So you have Luke and his Gospel are represented by the ox and bull, because those would have been sacrificial animals at the time. It's representative of Christ's sacrificial nature. Mark's Gospel is represented by the lion, because it's representing the royal lineage of Jesus back to David. And then the Gospel of Matthew is represented by a man or an angel. That really represents the human qualities of Jesus. And then the eagle is representing John's Gospel because of its soaring oratory. And so I just find that fascinating that these symbols and these icons that you can find in the catacombs in Rome from the 200s and 300s are still being used in our very own sanctuary today.
Right. Our rates of literacy are a little bit higher, but we still have symbols all over the place in our stained glass and our wood carvings. And yeah, so as Alex moves us through, one of the interesting things is just the social context of the different art forms. And so, this early period where we start in the catacombs, right, underground minority group, sort of still a loose connection of folks not yet institutionalized in some ways. So really interesting, and that will shift as we jump to early 17th century, staying in Rome and Europe, yes. But Caravaggio.
Exactly. So we have now fast forwarded a few centuries. Let's see if we can go. Here we go. Okay. So Caravaggio is just a fascinating figure, and we could talk for a long time about just who he was as a character. But he really was transformative in the way that he brought light and shadows into his depictions. He was really kind of the artist who inspired the Baroque movement after this. But when you all were looking at this piece, what stood out to you? Very meek baby.
Very big baby?
Very big baby, yes.
Right, like
yes.
a 4 or 5 year old baby weighing about
Absolutely.
50 pounds or something. I'm impressed with Mary's just holding him with no strain on her face. Yeah.
Yeah. What else?
Anything else? Purple, yeah.
Yes, so yeah, the purple is often seen as a royal color. So it is a nod to the royal lineage of Jesus. But unlike the popular styles of art at the time, so in the periods leading up to this, you have the church from the Eastern Church is depicting any kind of saints, including the Virgin Mary and Jesus, almost as these royal kind of aristocratic figures. You see the big gold halos around their heads. Here we still have a halo, but it's barely there. It's very faint. And we were talking the other day about how artists, even the artists who are making something totally new, might be still drawing on the language and the creative styles that they know. But the reason why this was so shocking at the time was because of the depiction here. The way that the Virgin Mary and Jesus are shown is they're depicted as everyday people. They're not necessarily depicted as royalty or monarchy. They are interacting and having a direct relationship here with these two people who are peasants. So they're among the lower classes. You can see the bottom of the feet of the man, and you can actually see the dirt on his feet. That would have been completely new and shocking. And this actually went against the rules of the archbishop who was in power at the time. He said that you could never depict the saints engaging in ordinary activities. So this was in direct defiance of
violation, right? So yes. we were talking this week about it's interesting how there's always a break, a shift, right, in these artistic innovations, but it's never a clean break. They're always in conversation. So you can lessen the halo, Caravaggio can, but can't quite bring himself to get rid of the halo above Mary. And one of the things all Christian art has been known for is it's the great themes of sort of suffering, crucifixion, hunger, lots of scenes, not here, but of Mary nursing the Christ child. And love, just this would be a scene of tenderness, lots of Madonna and child images. So there's an intensity of human emotion registered through sort of the Holy Family. And this is still in that tradition, but like Alex said, making these really interesting innovations, right? So the peasants, but probably some rich people can commission this art, I assume?
Absolutely,
okay.
Yeah. So it was actually a family who was an heir to a wealthy person in Italy at the time. Caravaggio had quite the reputation for being commissioned for pieces of art and then having to completely redo them because he deviated so much from the assignment of what he was asked to do. Mm-hmm. And so this was, of course, shocking at the time. This also, one thing that's just interesting compositionally, but also in terms of the message it sends is the frame of the door, where it is, draws a direct connection, a direct line between Mary and the peasant people here. And so the fact that there's a direct interaction happening there, to me, it's validating these people, even though they would be from the lower classes. And interestingly, this image became a devotional image for the lower classes after this time. And so the idea that God is working through artists in the art world in order to expand access to the gospel and to people knowing the faith. That's what I think is really beautiful and powerful about this piece of art.
Yeah, and all this art tradition, picking up on the theme of incarnation, right? That God's glad to dwell in the ordinary, can be materialized. So let's move to Van Gogh over here.
Yeah.
Jumping forward a couple more centuries and to North Europe.
Okay, so this is a very striking image. To me, it's very vibrant and alive. But when you all were looking at this one, what were a couple things that you noticed? Yeah, Meryl. The beautiful color?
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Anything else? Yes, exactly. Yeah, so there's a lot of symbolism here. This is just such a powerful image in so many ways. So this is depicting the Good Samaritan, which has special meaning for us because the Good Samaritan is right up there in our Tiffany window. But there's a lot here in terms of decisions that were made by Van Gogh about how to present this. So this piece was actually created just 2 months before Van Gogh died. At this time, he was not in a good place mentally or emotionally. He was actually institutionalized, and so he would not have had as many live subjects to draw from or depict. And so he really turned back to religion. Because biblical scenes were something that he could create and paint even from his confinement. We were also talking about Van Gogh is also a fascinating figure, and I think you recently read a bio on him.
Yeah, it's fascinating. They did turn back to religious themes because he had a massive blow up with his father, right? And never the two met again. His father, who was a Reformed pastor, and so...
Yeah, Van Gogh was a preacher's kid.
A preacher, and as preacher's kids often do. Van Gogh said, this religion stuff is BS. I'm out of here. I don't believe this anymore. I'm an atheist. But still, late in life, returned to sort of gospel scenes. So not Madonna and Child, right? So not Christ figures, but a religious scene, the Good Samaritan story, which gets at, sort of even... sinking down further into the ordinary. So the way we care for one another was more interesting to Van Gogh.
Absolutely. And so Van Gogh would have been inspired by artists that came before him. And so this work is actually, you can see how it was inspired by Rembrandt's Good Samaritan there on the left. And then it's actually a copy of Delacroix's Good Samaritan. But it's not like he just is remaking or copying it exactly like this. He's completely reimagining what this is. And so what Meryl was speaking to, the vibrancy of color and the brushworks give it a sense of life and energy and movement that really brings you into the piece. The composition also, shows the subjects and the horse are near the foreground, and so that has an immediacy to the scene. I feel like he brings you into the story in a really powerful way. And what's also interesting is just the way that he represents both the Good Samaritan and the Jewish traveler. So at the time in Israel, when the story was told, the Samaritans would have been at the bottom of the social hierarchy. And in this piece, Van Gogh has completely flipped that. So now the Samaritan is actually being depicted in these vibrant clothes and more as an upper class person.
And what you had mentioned that I didn't realize, that this might be Van Gogh, the wounded one, and his brother Theo, right, helping him back on.
Exactly, yeah. So that was fascinating to learn about as well. So Van Gogh had a very close relationship with his brother Theo, and even though he had a big fight with his father, he was essentially estranged from most of his family, but his brother Theo was almost his personal Good Samaritan. Yeah. He was the one family member who was always there for him, and there's hundreds and hundreds of letters of correspondence that we have between Vincent and Theo. And because of that, we have more insight into Van Gogh than just about any of the master artists, about understanding his creative process and how he thought about art and what his intentions were in depicting subject matter like this.
Yeah, and even though a personal move away from personal piety in a way for Van Gogh, still the importance of the whole tradition evident here. So 3 quick case studies just to think about the different ways that the church has interacted with the arts, sponsored the arts, funded the arts, inspired the arts, and if there's anything else wrap-up-wise you want to say here, but we need to cut out soon because we're going to come back in our second chunk and talk about a Second Presbyterian and its role with the arts. Anything else here?
Yeah, I think we've said it pretty much, but just to be thinking about how has that symbolism continued here, and how does that relationship between the church and art continue to evolve and reveal itself in different ways.
Very cool. Okay, stay tuned for part 2. Jimmy, you want to come? And kids, you want to come up for your time with Jimmy? Alex, if you want to return for part 2 here. So we've been talking about some interesting episodes from art history, but let's shift now and talk about this. How this all reflects here at Life in Second. And let's start here in the sanctuary, this gorgeous space in which we're now sitting. I remember showing up here in February when I started and just sort of being overwhelmed by the beauty of this room. So I assume it's always looked like this, right?
No, not actually. Okay. So, one of the interesting things about this sanctuary, and I had assumed also that this stained glass had been here since maybe the beginning of when this room was created. But the stained glass and many of the wood carvings up here, all of this was actually introduced and redone in the late 1940s. So really not that long ago when you consider that this sanctuary has been here since 1915. So that was so fascinating to learn about the intentional choices that were made by this church to transform this space into an even more beautiful gathering space that could really be a place of storytelling, but also a place for people to meet God. Yeah, and even the literal layout of openings and aisles. I mean, I think you have an image you were going to show here. Yeah, so this was another thing that prior to 1949, we actually did not have a center aisle. So this is what the sanctuary used to look like. 2 aisles on the sides, and the chancel area was completely different, as you can see there. So our chancel now goes much further back, many more icons and artistry that was added up here. But the choice to go to a center aisle was very intentional on the part of Second, and what they said at the time was, we want to provide an open way. And a big part of our faith as a Protestant denomination is the idea that all people should be able to access God and to make that pilgrimage through that open way. And so that's actually what this center aisle is meant to be. Almost connecting us back to the Caravaggio painting of access for everyone, right? So absolutely. God pleased to dwell in the midst of us, right? Right, and our scripture text, isn't that connected to this part of the story? Yes, yep. And let's see, wondering if we have one more quote that I want to share, and then we'll get to the scripture. So this was a quote from Part Johnson, who was the pastor at the time of the dedication of the renovation here. And he talked about, it's the living Jesus who meets us here. I love this quote. This is the living truth which our church seeks to assert, not only in the word that is preached, but in the very structure and ornament and message of this holy place. I like that. Yeah. That places can express part of the good news. Just being in a place, how you feel in a place. Absolutely. And that's one thing that I heard a lot during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, when we were all worshiping from home. And our staff team was obviously working hard to create as meaningful of a worship experience as we could. But the comment I heard over and over again was people saying, man, I just miss being in the sanctuary. There's something about being in this space that is just beautiful, and you can see how generations of second artists and creators have contributed to the beauty of this space.
And I've heard that since I've been here, how meaningful it is to be back together. So relationally, yes, but also in this particular space. Yeah. So the
scripture.
Here's the Hebrew text. I don't know if it's up there.
Yeah. There we go.
So let me read it, then you comment on the significance of it. So this is from Hebrews 10. Brothers and sisters, we have confidence that we can enter the Holy of Holies by means of Jesus' blood through a new and living way that he opened up for us through the curtain which is his body, and we have a great high priest over God's house.
Yeah, so this is significant for a number of reasons, but this same verse, actually, the scripture passage was quoted by Park Johnson at the dedication for this sanctuary in 1949. And so the part that really stands out to me is the words, a new and living way. And I love that we can see that with the construction and the creation of the center aisle, creating that access for everyone, but also the way that art can speak a new language that's accessible to everyone. Almost art can serve as a type of universal language, whether it's pre-1500s, before literacy was widely available to people, or if it's today when somebody is walking into our church, and whether they are very familiar with this church or they're coming here for the first time and have no understanding of who we are and do not know about the background of the church. The beauty and the stories that we project say something and speak something that words cannot always fully express.
Right. And probably just walking in here, a person could catch some sense of what we're up to, what the vision of the good life we are all about, just by being in the space, the way it's laid out, the beauty of it, the visual stories that it carries. We don't, Peter Thompson really needs some help understanding why we only have one arm of a transept. We don't have time for that today. I apologize. But what I do want to do is say, it's true of this gorgeous room, but can you talk a little bit about other parts of the building and
Absolutely,
the design elements in other parts of the building?
Yeah, so what I love about the decisions that we have continued to make as a church is how we've carried this same idea of creating a new and living way that started here with our sanctuary, and we've really carried that through with other parts of the building, how we've redone these spaces to be more open and accessible to everyone. So the idea that with our new spaces, with our front porch, somebody can see what's happening there, even if they're passing by, if they're walking by on the trolley trail or driving by on Brookside Boulevard. But on Wednesday nights, we're out there gathering for live music and poetry this coming week. So we're celebrating the arts in a very visible way that whether somebody knows nothing about our church, that speaks to what we value, that we celebrate creators and musicians and artists. And from there, then you walk in to our new west entryway in that hallway where we have the rotating art exhibits. And so 1 month it could be Max Penner's food as art, or the next it could be something totally different. And the fact that we view that as a place to showcase that art and that creativity, not only of Second members, but artists in the community, I think says something about that inclusive nature of Second.
Absolutely, and connecting to the themes of sort of how you move through the art history and sort of that incarnational focus on God's pleasure to dwell in the ordinary, sort of connecting to our neighborhood and welcoming all different kinds of art. Is it a further expression of that? And So just a little advertisement here. Next week, we'll be focusing on music as an art form, and then 2 weeks from today, focusing on art and design, the front porch, and some of our architects and designers are going to help us think about the importance of the front porch. So more on this later. Yeah, anything else you want to say about the structure of the building, or you want to move to art on oak, which Winnie introduced?
Yeah, let's move to art on oak.
Okay.
So, Winnie did a great job speaking on behalf of that group. Let's see, wrong way there. But I love art on oak because it really came about several years ago, and it was birthed from this group of second artists who, again, not only wanted to be able to showcase the talents of our congregation, but open it up to artists from all over Kansas City in all different styles too. And so it was a unique vision to transform the spaces in our building into galleries and to invite people in. And I love the intergenerational nature of art on oak. You can see, I love the picture that's shown in the upper right-hand corner, and that's the Davenport family there. This was, I think, the first year or two of art on oak, but the idea that children can come in and feel that we value the arts, but it's also a place for them to be creative and to engage with the arts as part of engaging with their faith and learning about God.
Yeah, and we talked some about how it's really wonderful how art on oak breaks down the sort of border, makes it permeable between Second and the community, and sort of the gallery where people flow in and out, and the neighborhood's welcomes. That's really a wonderful statement about, our convictions about what the good news looks like here in our community.
Absolutely, yeah, and I love that it provides a way for artists to be a part of what's happening here. So people who are established and who have been a part of this community for a long time, but you also have people like Liz Vargas, who's in the lower left-hand photo, and she is a Mexican-American artist. If you go into the Kansas City room, the conference room near the west entry, you'll see some of her pieces that she's done there. She kind of has that sketchy style she does a lot of local Kansas City scenes, but I love that we can display her style, her type of artwork, alongside something that's totally different, and
I hadn't even noticed her art in there until you told me about that last week. So stop in that room, Casey room, on your way out if you're going out the front porchway on the west side. And of course, we make all artists sign some sort of pledge, a commitment to Presbyterian beliefs, right?
Yeah, right.
Sure, right.
Yeah.
We don't, and that's wonderful. I'm teasing.
Yeah.
Can I shift this in a bit more personal direction and ask you a question here? You're with us another week, wrapping up 10 years of service to Second in a communications role, which is a kind of an art and design heavy role, and you played a big part in so many of these different initiatives. Can you reflect, just as we wrap up here today, a little bit on what it's been like to be here in that art and design role?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came to Second 10 years ago. Some of you may know I studied art in college, got my degree in graphic design. I've always...
See, kids, you can get a job if you get an art degree.
Yeah,
He's living
right.
proof. Parents,
Pays
lighten
off.
up, okay?
But there was, something that I felt right away when I came to Second 10 years ago that, again, going back to that idea of art as a kind of language, there was something about about this community and the way that it values art and creativity that made me feel at home right away. And second is, I think we forget sometimes how fortunate we are to have the number of artists that we have here. We have a lot of talent in this community, and it was something that I have been inspired by over my time here, and I have loved being a part of cultivating that passion for creativity and the arts here. And there have been some people that have been really special as a part of my time here. The Art on Oak Committee, has been a big piece of that. All the planning and the work that they've put into the event, and the way that we've worked on developing that together over the years. and many of them are working behind the scenes and often don't get the credit that they deserve. But it really is remarkable how they begin planning in the spring for a fall event, and it takes a lot of work to bring in 35 to 40 artists, but what a testament to this church's value of creativity and artistry. So
You'll see what happened there. I asked Alex about him, and he's talking about you. That says something about Alex that won't surprise you.
yeah. But I do want to share just about some special people who have been, who were a part of this community and who we have since passed on. But if we think about the abundance of artists and creativity that we have here, so these 4 special people, George Dooley was an amazing artist in his own right and participated in Art on Oak. George is just an amazing, kind soul, but it was always a pleasure to talk with him about art. As I was cleaning out some of the files from my office this week, I came across my George Dooley file, which is the collection of stories that were in handwritten notes. This was after I first got here, and said it'd be great to profile members of our community. And so he every week would call up different people in our community, and we would feature that in the newsletter. But it's such an amazing thing to have that, and to see just how he was constantly building those connections and doing that through his artwork and his writing as well. And then of course Keith Anderson. Keith was also instrumental in the creation of Art on Oak. When I first got to Second, the first kind of welcome gathering I had, there were a group of Second staff and some members, and this boisterous guy came over, had a big laugh, and it was Keith Anderson. He had a way of just welcoming new people in, and it turned out that he also was an extremely talented artist. And so you can see we still have one of his pieces on display in the church as well. And then Louise Davis and Jim Hamill, 2 artists who this year's Art on Oak is actually going to be dedicated to, because we lost both of them in the past year here. But the talents that they brought were amazing, just as people and artists. Louise had exhibits here, but also was a part of Art on Oak several times. And then Jim had a quiet presence, but was known regionally for his watercolor work, and was really just a talent where you would see his art in all kinds of different places around Kansas City and beyond. But the way that he was able to bring his talents to Second and be a part of Art on Oak and inspiring other artists too. So just wanting to shine some light on these folks, because they were a big part of inspiring me and continuing our tradition of supporting the arts here. And I think about how the work that we're continuing to do is really carrying on part of their legacy as well.
Absolutely. Well, our official send-off and thank you to you is next week, but I do want to say thank you for all you've brought to this community over this past decade, and thank you for today, leading us through thinking afresh about how the arts nurture spirituality. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.